today is to share some facts about the China market, and hopefully what I shared today will help to shape your discussion and your debate over the course of the next 2 days. What we know about the China market. Broadly speaking, in the last financial year, Australia welcomed more than 750,000 visitors from China, and they collectively spent $5.2 billion in total. But if we dig deeper into the numbers, there are 4 interesting facts I want to share with you. The first one is that if you look at the blue line right on the left side of the slide, that is holiday arrivals. And the holiday visitors from China over the past 4 years had a 2.5 times increase. And that is good news. Because now, if you look at holiday arrivals plus the VFRs, those who come to Australia to visit friends and relatives, they account for 75% of the total arrivals from China. Second observation is also really good news, is that if we look at the holiday arrivals from China, that they spend on average $492 per night. And that is one of the highest per night spend among our key international inbound markets, in fact, on par with the visitors from the Middle East. However, if you look at the return visitors of this important high-yield segment, and currently China is only ranked 28%, which is ranked about 32 of all the international markets. And then if we look at in terms of the average length of stay for those holiday visitors, and they only stay 9.3 nights. So 2 interesting areas where I believe the opportunities are there to bring more of Chinese visitors come to Australia more often, and also to increase the length of stay. Now, the million-dollar question, or the billion-dollar question that is not on the slide, is how big is the FIT market from China? And I know that my colleagues, Rita and Tony, had a very good explanation of their view of the FIT market. What I want to do is present the perspective from the visa statistics. And if you're a Chinese visitor, you want to come to Australia, you have to apply one of the 4 types of the short-term visitor visas. And the first one is ADS tourist visa. And the second category is the FIT tourist visa. And the third is a business visitor visa, and the fourth is the VFR, the visiting friends and relatives. Now, the FIT segment of the China market existed way before the tourism law came in. And if you look at back in 2006 and 2007, you've got about 50% of, or more than 50% of Chinese holidaymakers, they come to Australia on ADS visa. Why? Because ADS scheme is a bilateral scheme between China and Australia, where the Chinese travelers can travel to Australia on strict group itineraries in exchange for fast and easy visa processing. And that number has gradually declined over the course of the past 7-8 years. Before the tourism law was implemented, ADS visa was about 45% of total holiday visa grant. And after tourism law was implemented, when the low-value shopping tours, which were often associated with ADS groups, and that now more than 65% of Chinese holiday travelers come to Australia on non-ADS visa. And I think if I take the 2/3 of the holiday arrivals from China, and if I add all the other segments, the VFRs, the business, which are more likely to be FIT, we're looking at that last year, up to 400,000 Chinese travelers come to Australia on non-ADS short visitor visa. And that is a different view of looking at how big the market is in terms of FIT. Now, traveling from China to Australia, I know many of the colleagues here, they've had experience in the past dealing with Japanese travelers. Now, one thing that the Chinese is different from the Japanese is where Japanese like to travel on direct flight into Australia. And in fact, 75% of them come to Australia on direct flights. You can see Chinese travelers, they spread across all major airlines. And to them, they're more conscious of the cost of airfare than the inconvenience of having the stopover. And also, they've got more money to spend when they're in destination. And interesting observation is that Cathay Pacific carries 15% of the market share from China. Now, bear in mind that you've got a 15 million people city called Shenzhen that borders Hong Kong, and very often people from Shenzhen go to Hong Kong airport, and to them, the Cathays fly from Hong Kong to various locations into Australia is viewed as direct flight. So it's a very interesting balanced view, and I think that for the China market, that aviation capacity is definitely not as an issue as big as what we have for the Japanese market. If you speak to the regional operators, I mean, one of the questions that they will always ask is that what does that mean for me? And how likely is the travelers to disperse to regional destinations? Now, the Chinese travelers these days, they are more confident, they are more adventurous, and I think also that they are less bothered by the fact they don't speak perfect English than other Asian visitors. And so sometimes when the Chinese travelers do not visit regional destinations or the numbers are not as big as what you would like to see them, it's because that the awareness and the destination knowledge is not there yet. So case in example, I don't know how many of you know the story about Bobby the lavender bear. So the Bobby the lavender bear is comes from a lavender farm in Tasmania called the Brightstow. And there was, I think, a year ago, there's a Chinese celebrity couple that went to Tasmania, and they brought those Bobby the lavender bear, they brought back to China, and they tweet about those lavender bears on social media, and it became an instant sensation. First, it's the status of that power, the couple, which is the romance stories was all in the news in China. And then they brought this new destination, Tasmania, and experienced the lavender bear and the Brightstow farm to the limelight. And even though that their relationship did not last very long, but the brand name of Tasmania in China has just, rocketed. If you look at the arrivals into Tasmania from China last financial year, it grew by 47%, and that means the power of the awareness in terms of for regional destinations in Australia. And I think that the real opportunity is how do you make the regional products known to the Chinese market. The last topic I want to talk about is really around the high-yield travelers. We did a research in conjunction with Tourism Research Australia, and we had defined the high-yield travelers to be the people who either spend more than $4,000 per trip or they spend more than $300 per night when they are visiting Australia. And the key learning is that about half of Asian leisure visitor expenditure in Australia is generated by just 10% of visitors. So think how powerful the message is. 10% spend 50% of that contribution to the economy. And the Chinese high-yield visitors, they accounted for 32% of those Asian high-spend leisure expenditure in Australia. And people always ask, so what do they buy? What do they spend on? And I can tell you that shopping is by far one of the most important categories of spend. Because Chinese, they come to Australia, they don't just buy it for themselves. They buy it for their family, their friends, their colleagues, and pretty much the entire social circle they've got. And if you look at in terms of the buying in Australia and take home to China, it's just that anybody that you talk to, and they will always say, I have a long shopping list. So it's really around when you think about your products, that having that gift shop there probably is going to be one of your biggest moneymaker in terms of getting the Chinese market to give you the yield that you want. So I know my presentation is very short, and we're running short on time. But now what I want to do is take all my points and bring it to that 2020 target. And back in 2011, when Tourism Australia working with all the STOs, look at the potential of the China market, we put the 2020 potential at between $7.4 billion to $9 billion. And currently we're tracking above the upper case upper scenario of that forecast. In fact, in our recent reforecast, we think that the China potential could be as high as $13 billion because of that, very fast growth of holiday visitors, the high yield potential of the customers, and in the future will be high dispersal as well as the return visitors, and all those opportunities areas are very, very big for us, for Queensland, for Australia. So all of us at Tourism Australia, in partnership with TEQ and Tourism Sunshine Coast and all the tourism bodies around the country, and we are committed to work with all of you who are passionate, who are committed about the China market. And so let us work together to bring China across the finish line with $13 billion. Thank you.
As Andy just mentioned, today, this presentation is really just to outline some of the facts and also just to remind everyone about our 2020 target. Andy has just mentioned about lots of stats in terms of from the macro perspective, and what I would like to share here with you all is really to put Queensland into perspective in terms of how we compare with Chinese visitors to Australia. So if we look at the left pie here, the big difference here is that you see the holiday visitors number. So for Chinese travelers, 53% of Chinese travelers visit Australia for holiday, whereas to Queensland, 83% of them, they come here for holiday. And if we look at the visitor number to Queensland, I know there are lots of numbers here. I just want to highlight some of the differences here. As we see here, in terms of total visitor number to Australia, average length of stay here is 8 days, whereas to Queensland it's 4.3 days. So it's more than half of their stay in Australia actually is in Queensland. And also in terms of expenditure per visitor, it's close to 2,000. And here I'd just like to clarify, in terms of our statistics, in particular in terms of our expenditure, we only count expenditure in Queensland. So we don't count airfares and also package price prior to the trip to Australia into the expenditure. And also here, as you can see, I know that Andy mentioned in terms of visitor lots of repeat visitors to Chinese repeat visitors to Australia, but here, as you can see, we still got loads of first-timers to come to Queensland. So 74% of holiday visitors to Queensland, they are all first-timers to come to Queensland. And also we got much more percentage of package tours to Queensland. So package tours compared with the average number of Chinese visitors to Australia, package tours still take quite higher percentage than on average. Yeah. When we look at the travel pattern, we also see lots of them, they come as friends. So this is also something, as I think what Rita and also Tony mentioned, in terms of people like to travel as small groups, like from 3 to 15 people travel with friends together, or maybe a couple of families together in terms of on some of the theme tours, so which I will touch on that in a minute. Aviation is always very important for us, and we would like to have, direct access to Queensland, so in a way that they can spend more time in Queensland. So far, at the moment, as you can see here, we got a route from Beijing to Guangzhou and to Brisbane, and Shanghai Pudong Airport to Cairns as a seasonal route, and Hong Kong to Cairns, and Hong Kong to Brisbane, and Taipei to Brisbane. So when we look at the seasonality here, as I think a couple of previous speakers have already mentioned, you see all the pikes. Most of the pikes occur during Chinese New Year period of time, because that's a time really, for these families, they travel, whereas for friends, when they travel, it could be, during weekdays. So when we look at the total number of seats available for Chinese travelers to Queensland, Cathay Pacific and Qantas actually still takes a big role here. So Cathay Pacific, they have daily flight from Hong Kong to Brisbane. So for all these Chinese travelers, they can, with Dragon Air, they can fly from any part of China to Hong Kong and then get connecting flights from Hong Kong to Brisbane. So as Qantas, and also we got China Southern and EVA Air and China Airlines, but they all depart from Taipei. At the moment, Chinese travelers can't go via Taipei to Queensland yet. So based on all these things, back in 2011, we developed our China strategy. So by looking into where we go forward, in particular to reach the 2020 target. So we outlined these priority cities. So instead of using the terms what the other couple of speakers mentioned about Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 cities, we made them as established markets, developing markets, and emerging markets. And we use different strategies for these markets. So for the established market, these are the Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and we also add Hangzhou into it. For this established market, because we've been in market for so long, and we think we really need to step up and to look into how to promote on the fully independent travel, FIT travel, and also the theme tours. Whereas for the developing markets, these are the markets that we've been into, but it's in a sense that we haven't really rolled out much. For these markets, we would like to put effort into the mass market promotion as well as the theme tours. And for the emerging markets, these are the markets we haven't really tapped into, and these are the markets we would like to really promote on the mass market. Because for us, it's really the case, if we really want to reach the 2020 target, we need to look into not only the FIT, the high yield market, but also back to the mass market as well. So in terms of our target, 2020 target, where we are at the moment, I think we are just right on track, but there's loads of work for us to do. As you can see, the curve here, it just gets more steep towards 2020, so we need to work harder on it. That's my presentation. Thank you, 谢谢。
Queensland shines on me, where it shines. Queensland shines on me, where Australia shines.